Welcome back to the Seven Dials Mystery by Agatha Christie. So far, we've uncovered shocking secrets, unexpected twists, and the growing influence of a mysterious organization. But the truth is still just beyond reach. In this next part, the stakes get higher, and the mystery takes an even darker turn. Who is really pulling the strings? And how much danger lies ahead? Let's continue unraveling the puzzle and see what secrets still remain hidden. Bundle reached 14, Hunstanton Street, about 6 p. At that hour, as she rightly judged, the Seven Dials Club was a dead spot. Bundle's aim was a simple one. She intended to get hold of the ex-footman Alfred. She was convinced that once she had got hold of him, the rest would be easy. Bundle had a simple, autocratic method of dealing with retainers. It seldom failed, and she saw no reason why it should fail now. The only thing of which she was not certain was how many people inhabited the club premises. Naturally, she wished to disclose her presence to as few people as possible. While she was hesitating as to her best line of attack, the problem was solved for her in a singularly easy fashion. The door of No. 14 opened, and Alfred himself came out. "Good afternoon, Alfred," said Bundle pleasantly. Alfred jumped. "Oh, good afternoon, your ladyship. I didn't recognize your ladyship just for a moment." Paying a tribute in her own mind to her maid's clothing, Bundle proceeded to business. "I want a few words with you, Alfred. Where shall we go?" "Well, really, my lady, I don't know. It's not what you might call a nice part round here. I don't know, I'm sure." Bundle cut him short. "Who's in the club?" "No one at present, my lady." "Then we'll go in there." Alfred produced a key and opened the door. Bundle passed in. Alfred, troubled and sheepish, followed her. Bundle sat down and looked straight at the uncomfortable Alfred. "I suppose you know," she said crisply, "that what you're doing here is dead against the law." Alfred shifted uncomfortably from one foot to the other. "It's true as we've been raided twice," he admitted, "but nothing compromising was found, owing to the neatness of Mr. Moskarovsky's arrangements." "I'm not talking of the gambling only," said Bundle. "There's more than that. Probably a great deal more than you know. I'm going to ask you a direct question, Alfred, and I should like the truth, please. How much were you paid for leaving Chimneys?" Alfred looked twice round the cornice, as though seeking for inspirations, swallowed 3 or 4 times, and then took the inevitable course of a weak will oppose to a strong one. "It was this way, your ladyship. Moskarovsky, he come with a party to visit Chimneys on one of the show days. Treadwell, he was indisposed like, an ingrowing toenail as a matter of fact, so it fell to me to show the parties over. At the end of the tour, Mr. Moskarovsky, he stays behind the rest, and, after giving me something handsome, he falls into conversation." "Yes," said Bundle encouragingly. "And the long and the short of it was," said Alfred, with a sudden acceleration of his narrative, "that he offers me £100 down to leave that instant minute and to look after this here club. He wanted someone as was used to the best families, to give the place a tone, as he put it. And, well, it seemed flying in the face of Providence to refuse, let alone that the wages I get here are just 3 times what they were as second footman." £100, said Bundle. "That's a very large sum, Alfred. Did they say anything about who was to fill your place at Chimneys?" "I demurred a bit, my lady, about leaving at once. As I pointed out, it wasn't usual and might cause inconvenience. But Mr. Moskarovsky, he knew of a young chap, been in good service and ready to come any minute. So I mentioned his name to Mr. Treadwell, and everything was settled pleasant-like." Bundle nodded. Her own suspicions had been correct, and the modus operandi was much as she had thought it to be. She essayed a further inquiry. "Who is Mr. Moskarovsky?" "Gentleman as runs this club. Russian gentleman. A very clever gentleman, too." Bundle abandoned the getting of information for the moment and proceeded to other matters. £100 is a very large sum of money, Alfred. "Larger than I ever handled, my lady," said Alfred with simple candor. "Did you never suspect that there was something wrong?" "Wrong, my lady?" "Yes. I'm not talking about the gambling. I mean something far more serious. You don't want to be sent to penal servitude, do you, Alfred?" "Oh, Lord, my lady, you don't mean it?" "I was at Scotland Yard the day before yesterday," said Bundle impressively. "I heard some very curious things. I want you to help me, Alfred, and if you do, well, if things go wrong, I'll put in a good word for you. Anything I can do, I shall be only too pleased, my lady. I mean, I would anyway." "Well, first," said Bundle, I want to go all over this place, from top to bottom. Accompanied by a mystified and scared Alfred, she made a very thorough tour of inspection. Nothing struck her until she came to the gaming room. There she noticed an inconspicuous door in a corner, and the door was locked. Alfred explained readily. That's used as a getaway, your ladyship. There's a room and a door onto a staircase what comes out in the next street. That's the way the gentry goes when there's a raid. But don't the police know about it? It's a cunning door, you see, my lady. Looks like a cupboard, that's all. Bundle felt a rising excitement. I must get in here, she said. Alfred shook his head. You can't, my lady, Mr. Moskarovsky, he has the key. Well, said Bundle, there are other keys. She perceived that the lock was a perfectly ordinary one, which probably could be easily unlocked by the key of one of the other doors. Alfred, rather troubled, was sent to collect likely specimens. The fourth that Bundle tried fitted. She turned it, opened the door, and passed through. She found herself in a small, dingy apartment. A long table occupied the center of the room, with chairs ranged round it. There was no other furniture in the room. Two built-in cupboards stood on either side of the fireplace. Alfred indicated the nearer one with a nod. That's it, he explained. Bundle tried the cupboard door, but it was locked, and she saw at once that this lock was a very different affair. It was of the patent kind that would only yield to its own key. Highly ingenious. It is, explained Alfred. It looks all right when opened. Shelves, with a few ledgers and that on it. Nobody'd ever suspect, but you touch the right spot and the whole thing swings open. Bundle had turned round and was surveying the room thoughtfully. The first thing she noticed was that the door by which they had entered was carefully fitted round with bays. It must be completely soundproof. Then her eyes wandered to the chairs. There were 7 of them, 3 each side, and one rather more imposing in design at the head of the table. Bundle's eyes brightened. She had found what she was looking for. This, she felt sure, was the meeting place of the secret organization. The place was almost perfectly planned. It looked so innocent. You could reach it just by stepping through the gaming room, or you could arrive there by the secret entrance. And any secrecy, any precautions were easily explained by the gaming going on in the next room. Idly, as these thoughts passed through her mind, she drew a finger across the marble of the mantelpiece. Alfred saw and misinterpreted the action. You won't find no dirt, not to speak of, he said. Mr. Moskarovsky, he ordered the place to be swept out this morning, and I did it while he waited. Oh, said Bundle, thinking very hard. This morning, has to be done sometimes, said Alfred, though the room's never what you might call used. Next minute, he received a shock. Alfred, said Bundle, you've got to find me a place in this room where I can hide. Alfred looked at her in dismay. But it's impossible, my lady. You'll get me into trouble, and I'll lose my job. You'll lose it anyway when you go to prison, said Bundle unkindly. But as a matter of fact, you needn't worry. Nobody will know anything about it. And there ain't no place, wailed Alfred. Look round for yourself, your ladyship, if you don't believe me. Bundle was forced to admit that there was something in this argument, but she had the true spirit of one undertaking adventures. Nonsense, she said with determination. There has got to be a place. But there ain't one, wailed Alfred. Never had a room shown itself more unpropitious for concealment. Dingy blinds were drawn down over the dirty window panes, and there were no curtains. The windowsill outside, which Bundle examined, was about 4 inches wide. Inside the room, there were the table, the chairs, and the cupboards. The second cupboard had a key in the lock. Bundle went across and pulled it open. Inside were shelves covered with an odd assortment of glasses and crockery. Surplus stuff as we don't use, explained Alfred. You can see for yourself, my lady. There's no place here as a cat could hide. But Bundle was examining the shelves. Flimsy work, she said. Now, then, Alfred, have you got a cupboard downstairs where you could shove all this glass? You have. Good. Then get a tray and start to carry it down at once. Hurry. There's no time to lose. You can't, my lady, and it's getting late, too. The cooks will be here any minute now. Mr. Moscow whatnot doesn't come till later, I suppose. He's never here much before midnight. But oh, my lady, don't talk so much, Alfred, said Bundle. Get that tray. If you stay here arguing, you will get into trouble. Doing what is familiarly known as wringing his hands, Alfred departed. Presently he returned with a tray, and having by now realized that his protests were useless, he worked with a nervous energy quite surprising. As Bundle had seen, the shelves were easily detachable. She took them down, ranged them upright against the wall, and then stepped in. she remarked. Pretty narrow. It's going to be a tight fit. Shut the door on me carefully. Alfred. That's right. Yes, it can be done. Now I want a gimlet. A gimlet, my lady? That's what I said. I don't know. Nonsense. You must have a gimlet. Perhaps you got an auger as well. If you haven't got what I want, you'll have to go out and buy it. So you'd better try hard to find the right thing. Alfred departed and returned presently with quite a creditable assortment of tools. Bundle seized what she wanted and proceeded swiftly and efficiently to bore a small hole at the level of her right eye. She did this from the outside so that it should be less noticeable, and she dared not make it too large lest it should attract attention. There, that'll do, she remarked at last. Oh, but my lady, yes. But they'll find you if they should open the door. They won't open the door, said Bundle, because you're going to lock it and take the key away. And if by any chance Mr. Moskarovsky should ask for the key, tell him it's lost, said Bundle briskly. But nobody's going to worry about this cupboard. It's only here to attract attention from the other one and make a pair. Go on, Alfred. Someone might come any time. Lock me in and take the key and come and let me out when everyone's gone. You'll be taken bad, my lady. You'll faint. I never faint, said Bundle. But you might as well give me a cocktail. I shall certainly need it. Then lock the door of the room again. Don't forget. And take all the door keys back to their proper doors. And Alfred, don't be too much of a rabbit. Remember, if anything goes wrong, I'll see you through. And that's that, said Bundle to herself when, having served the cocktail, Alfred had finally departed. She was not nervous lest Alfred's nerve should fail and he should give her away. She knew that his sense of self-preservation was far too strong for that. His training alone helped him to conceal private emotions beneath the mask of a well-trained servant. Only one thing worried Bundle. The interpretation she had chosen to put upon the cleaning of the room that morning might be all wrong. And if so, Bundle sighed in the narrow confines of the cupboard. The prospect of spending long hours in it for nothing was not attractive. It would be as well to pass over the sufferings of the next 4 hours as quickly as possible. Bundle found her position extremely cramped. She had judged that the meeting, if meeting there was to be, would take place at a time when the club was in full swing, somewhere probably between the hours of midnight and 2 a.m. She was just deciding that it must be at least 6 o'clock in the morning when a welcome sound came to her ears, the sound of the unlocking of a door. In another minute the electric light was switched on. The hum of voices, which had come to her for a minute or two, rather like the far-off roar of sea waves, ceased as suddenly as it had begun, and Bundle heard the sound of a bolt being shot. Clearly someone had come in from the gaming room next door, and she paid tribute to the thoroughness with which the communicating door had been rendered soundproof. In another minute the intruder came into her line of vision, a line of vision that was necessarily somewhat incomplete, but which yet answered its purpose. A tall man, broad-shouldered and powerful-looking, with a long black beard. Bundle remembered having seen him sitting at one of the baccarat tables on the preceding night. This, then, was Alfred's mysterious Russian gentleman, the proprietor of the club, the sinister Mr. Moskarovsky. Bundle's heart beat faster with excitement. So little did she resemble her father that at this minute she fairly gloried in the extreme discomfort of her position. The Russian remained for some minutes standing by the table, stroking his beard. Then he drew a watch from his pocket and glanced at the time. Nodding his head as though satisfied, he again thrust his hand into his pocket and, pulling out something that Bundle could not see, he moved out of her line of vision. When he reappeared again, she could hardly help giving a gasp of surprise. His face was now covered by a mask, but hardly a mask in the conventional sense. It was not shaped to the face. It was a mere piece of material hanging in front of the features like a curtain in which 2 slits were pierced for the eyes. In shape it was round, and on it was the representation of a clock face, with the hands pointing to 6 o'clock. The 7 dials, said Bundle to herself. And at that minute there came a new sound, 7 muffled taps. Moskarovsky strode across to where Bundle knew was the other cupboard door. She heard a sharp click, and then the sound of greetings in a foreign tongue. Presently she had a view of the newcomers. They also wore clock masks, but in their case the hands were in a different position, 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock respectively. Both men were in evening dress, but with a difference. One was an elegant, slender young man wearing evening clothes of exquisite cut. The grace with which he moved was foreign rather than English. The other man could be better described as wiry and lean. His clothes fitted him sufficiently well, but no more, and Bundle guessed at his nationality even before she heard his voice. I reckon we're the first to arrive at this little meeting. A full, pleasant voice with a slight American drawl and an inflection of Irish behind it. The elegant young man said in good, but slightly stilted English, "I had much difficulty in getting away tonight. These things do not always arrange themselves, fortunately. I'm not like no, for here, my own master." Bundle tried to guess at his nationality. Until he spoke, she had thought he might be French, but the accent was not a French one. He might possibly, she thought, be an Austrian, or a Hungarian, or even a Russian. The American moved to the other side of the table, and Bundle heard a chair being pulled out. "1 o'clock's being a great success," he said. "I congratulate you on taking the risk." 5 o'clock shrugged his shoulders. "Unless one takes risks." He left the sentence unfinished. Again 7 taps sounded, and Moskarovsky moved across to the secret door. She failed to catch anything definite for some moments, since the whole company were out of sight. But presently she heard the bearded Russian's voice upraised. "Shall we begin proceedings?" He himself came round the table and took the seat next to the armchair at the top. Sitting thus, he was directly facing Bundle's cupboard. The elegant 5 o'clock took the place next to him. The third chair that side was out of Bundle's sight, but the American for moved into her line of vision for a moment or two before he sat down. On the near side of the table also, only 2 chairs were visible, and as she watched a hand turn the second, really the middle chair, down, and then with a swift movement, one of the newcomers brushed past the cupboard and took the chair opposite Moskarovsky. Whoever sat there had, of course, their back directly turned to Bundle, and it was at that back that Bundle was staring with a good deal of interest, for it was the back of a singularly beautiful woman, very much décolleté. It was she who spoke first. Her voice was musical, foreign, with a deep seductive note in it. She was glancing towards the empty chair at the head of the table. "So we are not to see now. 7 tonight," she said. "Tell me, my friends, shall we ever see him?" "That's darn good," said the American. "Darn good. As for 7 o'clock, I'm beginning to believe there is no such person. I should not advise you to think that, my friend," said the Russian pleasantly. There was a silence, rather an uncomfortable silence, Bundle felt. She was still staring as though fascinated at the beautiful back in front of her. There was a tiny black mole just below the right shoulder blade that enhanced the whiteness of the skin. Bundle felt that at last the term beautiful adventuress, so often read, had a real meaning for her. She was quite certain that this woman had a beautiful face, a dark Slavonic face with passionate eyes. She was recalled from her imaginings by the voice of the Russian, who seemed to act as master of ceremonies. "Shall we get on with our business? First to our absent comrade." "No, 2. He made a curious gesture with his hand towards the turned-down chair next to the woman, which everyone present imitated, turning to the chair as they did so. "I wish no. 2 were with us tonight," he continued. "There are many things to be done. Unsuspected difficulties have arisen. Have you had his report?" It was the American who spoke. "As yet, I have nothing from him." There was a pause. "I cannot understand it. You think it may have gone astray?" "That is a possibility." "In other words," said 5 o'clock softly, "there is danger." He spoke the word delicately, and yet with relish. The Russian nodded emphatically. "Yes, there's danger. Too much is getting known about us, about this place. I know of several people who suspect." He added coldly, "They must be silenced." Bundle felt a little cold shiver pass down her spine. If she were to be found, would she be silenced? She was recalled suddenly to attention by a word. "So, nothing has come to light about chimneys?" Moskarovsky shook his head. "Nothing. Suddenly no." 5 leant forward. "I agree with Anna. Where's our president?" "No." 7? "He who called us into being. Why do we never see him?" "No." 7, said the Russian, "has his own ways of working. So you always say." "I will say more," said Moskarovsky. "I pity the man, or woman, who comes up against him." There was an awkward silence. "We must get on with our business," said Moskarovsky quietly. "No." 3. "You have the plans of Wyvern Abbey?" Bundle strained her ears. So far she had neither caught a glimpse of no. 3. Nor had she heard his voice. She heard it now and recognized it as unmistakable, low, pleasant, indistinct, the voice of a well-bred Englishman. "I've got them here, sir." Some papers were shoved across the table. Everyone bent forward. Presently Moskarovsky raised his head again. And a list of guests. Here, the Russian read them. Sir Stanley Digby, Terence O'Rourke, Sir Oswald and Lady Coote, Bateman, Countess Anna Radsky, Mrs. Makata, James Thesiger. He paused and then asked sharply, "Who is Mr. James Thesiger?" The American laughed. "I guess you needn't worry any about him. The usual complete young ass." The Russian continued reading. "Her Eberhard and Mr. Eversley. That completes the list." "Does it?" said Bundle silently. "What about that sweet girl, Lady Eileen Brent?" "Yes, there seems nothing to worry about there," said Moskarovsky. He looked across the table. "I suppose there's no doubt whatever about the value of Eberhard's invention." 3 o'clock made a laconic British reply. "None whatever. Commercially, it should be worth millions," said the Russian. "And internationally, well, one knows only too well the greed of nations." Bundle had an idea that behind his mask he was smiling unpleasantly. "Yes," he went on, "a gold mine. Well worth a few lives?" said No. 5 cynically and laughed. "But you know what inventors are," said the American. "Sometimes these darn things won't work." "A man like Sir Oswald Coote will have made no mistake," said Moskarovsky. "Speaking as an aviator myself," said No. 5. "The thing is perfectly feasible. It has been discussed for years, but it needed the genius of Eberhard to bring it to fruition." "Well," said Moskarovsky, "I don't think we need discuss matters any further. You have all seen the plans. I do not think our original scheme can be bettered. By the way, I hear something about a letter of Gerald Wade's that has been found, a letter that mentions this organization." "Who found it?" "Lord Cunningham's daughter, Lady Eileen Brent." "Bauer should have been on to that," said Moskarovsky. "It was careless of him." "Who was the letter written to?" "His sister, I believe," said No. "Unfortunate," said Moskarovsky, "but it cannot be helped. The inquest on Ronald Devereux is tomorrow. I suppose it has been arranged for." "Reports as to local lads having been practicing with rifles have been spread everywhere," said the American. "That should be all right then. I think there is nothing further to be said. I think we must all congratulate our dear 1 o'clock and wish her luck in the part she has to play." "Hurrah!" cried No. to Anna. All hands flew out in the same gesture which Bundle had noticed before. To Anna. 1 o'clock acknowledged the salutation with a typically foreign gesture. Then she rose to her feet, and the others followed suit. For the first time, Bundle caught a glimpse of No. 3 as he came to put Anna's cloak round her, a tall, heavily built man. Then the party filed out through the secret door. Moskarovsky secured it after them. He waited a few moments, and then Bundle heard him unbolt the other door and pass through, after extinguishing the electric light. It was not until 2 hours later that a white and anxious Alfred came to release Bundle. She almost fell into his arms, and he had to hold her up. "Nothing," said Bundle. "Just stiff, that's all. Here, let me sit down." "Oh, Gore, my lady, it's been awful." "Nonsense," said Bundle. "It all went off splendidly. Don't get the wind up now, it's all over. It might have gone wrong, but thank goodness it didn't." "Thank goodness, as you say, my lady. I've been in a twitter all the evening. They're a funny crowd, you know." "A damned funny crowd," said Bundle, vigorously massaging her arms and legs. "As a matter of fact, they're the sort of crowd I always imagined until tonight only existed in books. In this life, Alfred, one never stops learning." Bundle reached home about 6 a.m. She was up and dressed by 9:30 and rang up Jimmy Thesiger on the telephone. The promptitude of his reply somewhat surprised her, till he explained that he was going down to attend the inquest. "So am I," said Bundle, "and I've got a lot to tell you." "Well, suppose you let me drive you down, and we can talk on the way." "How about that?" "All right, but allow a bit extra, because you'll have to take me to Chimneys. The chief constable's picking me up there." "Why?" "Because he's a kind man," said Bundle. "So am I," said Jimmy. "Very kind." "Oh, you're an ass," said Bundle. "I heard somebody say so last night." "Who?" "To be strictly accurate, a Russian Jew." "No, it wasn't. It was," but an indignant protest drowned her words. "I may be an ass," said Jimmy. "I dare say I am, but I won't have Russian Jews saying so." "What were you doing last night, Bundle?" "That's what I'm going to talk about," said Bundle. "Goodbye for the moment." She rang off in a tantalizing manner which left Jimmy pleasantly puzzled. He had the highest respect for Bundle's capabilities, though there was not the slightest trace of sentiment in his feeling toward her. "She's been up to something," he opined, as he took a last hasty drink of coffee. "Depend upon it, she's been up to something." 20 minutes later, his little two-seater drew up before the Brook Street house, and Bundle, who had been waiting, came tripping down the steps. Jimmy was not ordinarily an observant young man, but he noticed that there were black rings round Bundle's eyes, and that she had all the appearance of having had a late night the night before. "Now then," he said, as the car began to nose her way through the suburbs, "what dark deeds have you been up to?" "I'll tell you," said Bundle, "but don't interrupt until I've finished." It was a somewhat long story, and Jimmy had all he could do to keep sufficient attention on the car to prevent an accident. When Bundle had finished, he sighed, then looked at her searchingly. "Bundle?" "Yes." "Look here, you're not pulling my leg." "What do you mean?" "I'm sorry," apologized Jimmy, "but it seems to me as though I'd heard it all before, in a dream, you know." "I know," said Bundle sympathetically. "It's impossible," said Jimmy, following out his own train of thought. "The beautiful foreign adventuress, the international gang, the mysterious No. 7, whose identity nobody knows. I've read it all 100 times in books." "Of course you have. So have I. But it's no reason why it shouldn't really happen." "I suppose not," admitted Jimmy. "After all, I suppose fiction is founded on the truth. I mean, unless things did happen, people couldn't think of them." "There is something in what you say," agreed Jimmy. "But all the same, I can't help pinching myself to see if I'm awake." That's how I felt. Jimmy gave a deep sigh. "Well, I suppose we are awake. Let me see, a Russian, an American, an Englishman, a possible Austrian or Hungarian, and a lady who may be any nationality, for choice Russian or Polish. That's a pretty representative gathering." "And a German," said Bundle. "You've forgotten the German." "Oh," said Jimmy slowly. "You think the absent now, too, is Bauer, our footman. That seems to me quite clear from what they said about expecting a report, which hadn't come in. Though what there could be to report about chimneys, I can't think." "It must be something to do with Jerry Wade's death," said Jimmy. "There's something there we haven't fathomed yet." "You say they actually mentioned Bauer by name?" Bundle nodded. "They blamed him for not having found that letter." "Well, I don't see what you could have clearer than that. There's no going against it. You'll have to forgive my first incredulity, Bundle, but you know it was rather a tall story. You say they knew about my going down to Wyvern Abbey next week?" "Yes, that's when the American, it was him, not the Russian, said they needn't worry. You were only the usual kind of ass." "Ah," said Jimmy. He pressed his foot down on the accelerator viciously, and the car shot forward. "I'm very glad you told me that. It gives me what you might call a personal interest in the case." He was silent for a minute or two, and then he said, "Did you say that German inventor's name was Eberhard?" "Yes. Why?" "Wait a minute. Something's coming back to me. Eberhard. Yes, I'm sure that was the name. Tell me." "Eberhard was a Johnny who got some patent process he applied to steel. I can't put the thing properly because I haven't got the scientific knowledges, but I know the result was that it became so toughened that a wire was as strong as a steel bar had previously been. Eberhard had to do with airplanes, and his idea was that the weight would be so enormously reduced that flying would be practically revolutionized. The cost of it, I mean. I believe he offered his invention to the German government, and they turned it down, pointed out some undeniable flaw in it, but they did it rather nastily. He set to work and circumvented the difficulty, whatever it was, but he'd been offended by their attitude and swore they shouldn't have his lamb. I always thought the whole thing was probably bunkum, but now it looks differently." "That's it," said Bundle eagerly. "You must be right, Jimmy. Eberhard must have offered his invention to our government. They've been taking, or are going to take, Sir Oswald Coote's expert opinion on it. There's going to be an unofficial conference at the Abbey. Sir Oswald, George, the Air Minister, and Eberhard. Eberhard will have the plans, or the process, or whatever you call it. Formula, suggested Jimmy. I think formula is a good word myself. He'll have the formula with him, and the 7 dials are out to steal the formula. I remember the Russian saying it was worth millions." "I suppose it would be," said Jimmy. "And well worth a few lives. That's what the other man said." "Well, it seems to have been," said Jimmy, his face clouding over. "Look at this damned inquest today. Bundle, are you sure Ronnie said nothing else?" "No," said Bundle. "Just that. 7 dials. Tell Jimmy Thesiger. That's all he could get out, poor lad." "I wish we knew what he knew," said Jimmy. "But we found out one thing. I take it that the footman, Bauer, must almost certainly have been responsible for Jerry's death. You know, Bundle, yes? Well, I'm a bit worried sometimes. Who's going to be the next one? It really isn't the sort of business for a girl to be mixed up in. Bundle smiled in spite of herself. It occurred to her that it had taken Jimmy a long time to put her in the same category as Lorraine Wade. "It's far more likely to be you than me," she remarked cheerfully. "Here, here," said Jimmy. "But what about a few casualties on the other side for a change? I'm feeling rather bloodthirsty this morning. Tell me, Bundle, would you recognize any of these people if you saw them?" Bundle hesitated. "I think I should recognize no." "5," she said at last. "He's got a queer way of speaking, a kind of venomous, lisping way that I think I'd know again." "What about the Englishman?" Bundle shook her head. "I saw him least. Only a glimpse, and he's got a very ordinary voice. Except that he's a big man, there's nothing much to go by. There's the woman, of course," continued Jimmy. "She ought to be easier, but then you're not likely to run across her. She's probably putting in the dirty work, being taken out to dinner by amorous cabinet ministers and getting state secrets out of them when they've had a couple. At least, that's how it's done in books. As a matter of fact, the only cabinet minister I know drinks hot water with a dash of lemon in it. Take George Lomax, for instance. Can you imagine him being amorous with beautiful foreign women?" said Bundle with a laugh. Jimmy agreed with her criticism. "And now about the man of mystery." "No." 7. Went on Jimmy. "You've no idea who he could be?" "None whatever. Again, by book standard, that is, he ought to be someone we all know." "What about George Lomax himself?" Bundle reluctantly shook her head. "In a book it would be perfect," she agreed. "But knowing Cotters," and she gave herself up to sudden, uncontrollable mirth. "Cotters, the great criminal organizer," she gasped. "Wouldn't it be marvelous?" Jimmy agreed that it would. Their discussion had taken some time, and his driving had slowed down involuntarily once or twice. They arrived at Chimneys to find Colonel Melrose already there waiting. Jimmy was introduced to him, and they all three proceeded to the inquest together. As Colonel Melrose had predicted, the whole affair was very simple. Bundle gave her evidence. The doctor gave his. Evidence was given of rifle practice in the neighborhood. A verdict of death by misadventure was brought in. After the proceedings were over, Colonel Melrose volunteered to drive Bundle back to Chimneys, and Jimmy Thesiger returned to London. For all his light-hearted manner, Bundle's story had impressed him profoundly. He set his lips closely together. "Ronnie, old boy," he murmured, "I'm going to be up against it, and you're not here to join in the game." Another thought flashed into his mind. Lorraine, was she in danger? After a minute or two's hesitation, he went over to the telephone and rang her up. "It's me, Jimmy. I thought you'd like to know the result of the inquest. Death by misadventure." "Oh, yes, but I think there's something behind that." The coroner had a hint. "Someone's at work to hush it up." "I say, Lorraine." "Yes." "Look here, there's some funny business going about. You'll be very careful, won't you? For my sake." He heard the quick note of alarm that sprang into her voice. "Jimmy, but then it's dangerous for you." He laughed. "Oh, that's all right. I'm the cat that had 9 lives. Bye-bye, old thing." He rang off and remained a minute or two lost in thought. Then he summoned Stevens. "Do you think you could go out and buy me a pistol, Stevens?" "A pistol, sir?" True to his training, Stevens betrayed no hint of surprise. "What kind of pistol would you be requiring? The kind where you put your finger on the trigger and the thing goes on shooting until you take it off again." "An automatic, sir." "That's it," said Jimmy. "An automatic, and I should like it to be a blue-nosed one, if you and the shopman know what that is. In American stories, the hero always takes his blue-nosed automatic from his hip pocket." Stevens permitted himself a faint, discreet smile. "Most American gentlemen that I have known, sir, carry something very different in their hip pockets," he observed. Jimmy Thesiger laughed. Bundle drove over to Wyvern Abbey just in time for tea on Friday afternoon. George Lomax came forward to welcome her with considerable empressement. "My dear Eileen," he said, "I can't tell you how pleased I am to see you here. You must forgive my not having invited you when I asked your father. But to tell the truth, I never dreamed that a party of this kind would appeal to you. I was both, surprised and, delighted when Lady Caterham told me of your interest in, politics. I wanted to come so much," said Bundle in a simple, ingenuous manner. "Mrs. Macadda will not arrive till the later train," explained George. "She was speaking at a meeting in Manchester last night. Do you know Thesiger? Quite a young fellow, but a remarkable grasp of foreign politics. One would hardly suspect it from his appearance." "I know Mr. Thesiger," said Bundle, and she shook hands solemnly with Jimmy, who she observed had parted his hair in the middle in the endeavor to add earnestness to his expression. "Look here," said Jimmy in a low, hurried voice, as George temporarily withdrew. "You mustn't be angry, but I've told Bill about our little stunt." "Bill?" said Bundle, annoyed. "Well, after all," said Jimmy, "Bill is one of the lads, you know. Ronnie was a pal of his, and so was Jerry." "Oh, I know," said Bundle, "but you think it's a pity?" "Sorry, Bill's all right, of course." "It isn't that," said Bundle, "but well, Bill's a born blunderer. Not mentally very agile," suggested Jimmy. "But you forget one thing. Bill's got a very hefty fist, and I've an idea that a hefty fist is going to come in handy." "Well, perhaps you're right. How'd he take it?" "Well, he clutched his head a good bit, but the facts took some driving home. But by repeating the thing patiently in words of one syllable, I at last got it into his thick head. And, naturally, he's with us to the death, as you might say." George reappeared suddenly. "I must make some introductions, Eileen. This is Sir Stanley Digby, Lady Eileen Brent. O'Rourke." The Air Minister was a little round man with a cheerful smile. O'Rourke, a tall young man with laughing blue eyes and a typical Irish face, greeted Bundle with enthusiasm. "And I thinking it was going to be a dull political party entirely," he murmured in an adroit whisper. "Hush," said Bundle. "I'm political, very political. Sir Oswald and Lady Coote, you know," continued George. "We've never actually met," said Bundle, smiling. She was mentally applauding her father's descriptive powers. Sir Oswald took her hand in an iron grip, and she winced slightly. Lady Coote, after a somewhat mournful greeting, had turned to Jimmy Thesiger and appeared to be registering something closely akin to pleasure. Despite his reprehensible habit of being late for breakfast, Lady Coote had a fondness for this amiable, pink-faced young man. His air of irrepressible good nature fascinated her. She had a motherly wish to cure him of his bad habits and form him into one of the world's workers. Whether, once formed, he would be as attractive was a question she had never asked herself. She began now to tell him of a very painful motor accident which had happened to one of her friends. "Mr. Bateman," said George briefly, as one who would pass on to better things. A serious, pale-faced young man bowed. "And now," continued George, "I must introduce you to Countess Radsky." Countess Radsky had been conversing with Mr. Bateman, leaning very far back on the sofa, with her legs crossed in a daring manner. She was smoking a cigarette in an incredibly long turquoise-studded holder. Bundle thought she was one of the most beautiful women she had ever seen. Her eyes were very large and blue. Her hair was coal black. She had a matte skin, the slightly flattened nose of the Slav, and a sinuous, slender body. Her lips were reddened to a degree with which Bundle was sure Wyvern Abbey was totally unacquainted. She said eagerly, "This is Mrs. Macata, yes." On George's replying in the negative and introducing Bundle, the Countess gave her a careless nod and at once resumed her conversation with the serious Mr. Bateman. Bundle heard Jimmy's voice in her ear. "Pongo is absolutely fascinated by the lovely Slav," he said. "Pathetic, isn't it? Come and have some tea." They drifted once more into the neighborhood of Sir Oswald Coote. "That's a fine place of yours." "Chimneys," remarked the great man. "I'm glad you liked it," said Bundle meekly. "Wants new plumbing," said Sir Oswald. "Bring it up to date, you know." He ruminated for a minute or two. "I'm taking the Duke of Alton's place. 3 years, just while I'm looking round for a place of my own. Your father couldn't sell if he wanted to, I suppose." Bundle felt her breath taken away. She had a nightmare vision of England with innumerable Cootes and innumerable counterparts of Chimneys. All, be it understood, with an entirely new system of plumbing installed. She felt a sudden violent resentment which, she told herself, was absurd. After all, contrasting Lord Caterham with Sir Oswald Coote, there was no doubt as to who would go to the wall. Sir Oswald had one of those powerful personalities which make all those with whom they come in contact appear faded. He was, as Lord Caterham had said, a human steamroller. And yet, undoubtedly, in many ways, Sir Oswald was a stupid man. Apart from his special line of knowledge and his terrific driving force, he was probably intensely ignorant. 100 delicate appreciations of life, which Lord Caterham could and did enjoy, were a sealed book to Sir Oswald. Whilst indulging in these reflections, Bundle continued to chat pleasantly. Her Eberhard, she heard, had arrived, but was lying down with a nervous headache. This was told her by Mr. O'Rourke, who managed to find a place by her side and keep it. Altogether, Bundle went up to dress in a pleasant mood of expectation, with a slight nervous dread hovering in the background whenever she thought of the imminent arrival of Mrs. Agatha. Bundle felt that dalliance with Mrs. Agatha was going to prove no primrose path. Her first shock was when she came down, demurely attired in a black lace frock, and passed along the hall. A footman was standing there, at least a man dressed as a footman, but that square, burly figure lent itself badly to the deception. Bundle stopped and stared. "Superintendent Battle," she breathed. "That's right, Lady Eileen." "Oh," said Bundle uncertainly. "Are you here to keep an eye on things?" "I see. That warning letter, you know," said the superintendent. "Fairly put the wind up Mr. Lomax. Nothing would do for him but that I should come down myself." "But don't you think—" began Bundle and stopped. She hardly liked to suggest to the superintendent that his disguise was not a particularly efficient one. He seemed to have police officer written all over him, and Bundle could hardly imagine the most unsuspecting criminal failing to be put on his guard. "You think," said the superintendent stolidly, "that I might be recognized?" "I did think so, yes," admitted Bundle. Something that might conceivably have been intended for a smile crossed the woodenness of Superintendent Battle's features. "Put them on their guard, eh?" "Well, Lady Eileen, why not?" "Why not?" echoed Bundle. Rather stupidly, she felt. Superintendent Battle was nodding his head slowly. "We don't want any unpleasantness, do we?" he said. "Don't want to be too clever, to show any light-fingered gentry that may be about. Well, to show them that there's somebody on the spot, so to speak." Bundle gazed at him in some admiration. She could imagine that the sudden appearance of so renowned a personage as Superintendent Battle might have a depressing effect on any scheme and the hatchers of it. "It's a great mistake to be too clever," Superintendent Battle was repeating. "The great thing is not to have any unpleasantness this weekend." Bundle passed on, wondering how many of her fellow guests had recognized or would recognize the Scotland Yard detective. In the drawing-room, George was standing with a puckered brow and an orange envelope in his hand. "Most vexatious," he said. "A telegram from Mrs. Agatha to say she will be unable to be with us. Her children are suffering from mumps." Bundle's heart gave a throb of relief. "I especially feel this on your account, Eileen," said George kindly. "I know how anxious you were to meet her. The Countess, too, will be sadly disappointed." "Oh, never mind," said Bundle. "I should hate it if she'd come and given me mumps." "A very distressing complaint," agreed George. "But I do not think that infection could be carried that way. Indeed, I am sure that Mrs. Agatha would have run no risk of that kind. She is a most highly principled woman, with a very real sense of her responsibilities to the community. In these days of national stress, we must all take into account." On the brink of embarking on a speech, George pulled himself up short. "But it must be for another time," he said. "Fortunately, there is no hurry in your case. But the Countess, alas, is only a visitor to our shores." "She's a Hungarian, isn't she?" said Bundle, who was curious about the Countess. "Yes, you have heard, no doubt, of the Young Hungarian Party. The Countess is a leader in that party, a woman of great wealth. Left a widow at an early age, she has devoted her money and her talents to the public service. She has especially devoted herself to the problem of infant mortality, a terrible one under present conditions in Hungary. Here is her Eberhard." The German inventor was younger than Bundle had imagined him. He was probably not more than 33 or 4. He was boorish and ill at ease, and yet his personality was not an unpleasing one. His blue eyes were more shy than furtive, and his more unpleasant mannerisms, such as the one that Bill had described of gnawing his fingernails, arose, she thought, more from nervousness than from any other cause. He was thin and weedy in appearance, and looked anemic and delicate. He conversed rather awkwardly with Bundle in stilted English, and they both welcomed the interruption of the joyous Mr. O'Rourke. Presently Bill bustled in. There is no other word for it. In the same such way does a favored Newfoundland make his entrance, and at once came over to Bundle. He was looking perplexed and harassed. "Hello, Bundle. Heard you got here. Been kept with my nose to the grindstone all the blessed afternoon, or I'd have seen you before." "Cares of state heavy tonight," suggested O'Rourke sympathetically. Bill groaned. "I don't know what your fellow's like," he complained. "Looks a good-natured, tubby little chap, but Cotters is absolutely impossible. Drive, drive from morning to night. Everything you do is wrong, and everything you haven't done you ought to have done. Quite like a quotation from the prayer book, remarked Jimmy, who had just strolled up. Bill glanced at them reproachfully. Nobody knows, he said pathetically, what I have to put up with. Entertaining the Countess, suggested Jimmy. Poor Bill, that must have been a sad strain to a woman-hater like yourself. What's this? Asked Bundle. After tea, said Jimmy with a grin. The Countess asked Bill to show her round the interesting old place. Well, I couldn't refuse, could I? Said Bill, his countenance assuming a brick-red tint. Bundle felt faintly uneasy. She knew, only too well, the susceptibility of Mr. William Eversley to female charms. In the hands of a woman like the Countess, Bill would be as wax. She wondered once more whether Jimmy Thesiger had been wise to take Bill into their confidence. The Countess, said Bill, is a very charming woman, and intelligent. You should have seen her going round the house. All sorts of questions she asked. What kind of questions? Asked Bundle suddenly. Bill was vague. Oh, I don't know. About the history of it, and old furniture, and all sorts of things. At that moment, the Countess swept into the room. She seemed a shade breathless. She was looking magnificent in a close-fitting black velvet gown. Bundle noticed how Bill gravitated at once into her immediate neighborhood. The serious, spectacled young man joined him. Bill and Pongo have both got it badly, observed Jimmy Thesiger with a laugh. Bundle was by no means so sure that it was a laughing matter. George was not a believer in modern innovations. The Abbey was innocent of anything so up-to-date as central heating. Consequently, when the ladies entered the drawing room after dinner, the temperature of the room was woefully inadequate to the needs of modern evening clothes. The fire that burnt in the well-furnished steel grate became as a magnet. The three women huddled round it. "Beer," said the Countess, a fine, exotic foreign sound. "The days are drawing in," said Lady Coote, and drew a flowered atrocity of a scarf closer about her ample shoulders. "Why on earth doesn't George have the house properly heated?" said Bundle. "You English, you never heat your houses," said the Countess. She took out her long cigarette holder and began to smoke. "That grate is old-fashioned," said Lady Coote. "The heat goes up the chimney instead of into the room." "Oh," said the Countess. There was a pause. The Countess was so plainly bored by her company that conversation became difficult. "It's funny," said Lady Coote, breaking the silence, "that Mrs. McCadis children should have mumps. At least, I don't mean exactly funny." "What," said the Countess, "are mumps?" Bundle and Lady Coote started simultaneously to explain. Finally, between them, they managed it. "I suppose Hungarian children have it?" asked Lady Coote. "Yeah," said the Countess. "Hungarian children. They suffer from it." "I do not know," said the Countess. "How should I?" Lady Coote looked at her in some surprise. "But I understood that you worked that." The Countess uncrossed her legs, took her cigarette holder from her mouth, and began to talk rapidly. "I will tell you some horrors," she said. "Horrors that I have seen. Incredible. You would not believe." And she was as good as her word. She talked fluently and with a graphic power of description. Incredible scenes of starvation and misery were painted by her for the benefit of her audience. She spoke of Budapest shortly after the war and traced its vicissitudes to the present day. She was dramatic, but she was also, to Bundle's mind, a little like a gramophone record. You turned her on, and there you were. Presently, just as suddenly, she would stop. Lady Coote was thrilled to the marrow. That much was clear. She sat with her mouth slightly open and her large, sad, dark eyes fixed on the Countess. Occasionally, she interpolated a comment of her own. "One of my cousins had 3 children burned to death. Awful, wasn't it?" The Countess paid no attention. She went on, and she finally stopped as suddenly as she had begun. "There," she said, "I have told you. We have money, but no organization. It is organization we need." Lady Coote sighed. "I've heard my husband say that nothing can be done without regular methods. He attributes his own success entirely to that. He declares he would never have got on without them." She sighed again. A sudden fleeting vision passed before her eyes of Sir Oswald, who had not got on in the world. A Sir Oswald who retained, in all essentials, the attributes of that cheery young man in the bicycle shop. Just for a second, it occurred to her how much pleasanter life might have been for her if Sir Oswald had not had regular methods. By a quite understandable association of ideas, she turned to Bundle. "Tell me, Lady Eileen," she said, "do you like that head gardener of yours?" "MacDonald? Well, Bundle hesitated. One couldn't exactly like MacDonald, she explained apologetically, but he's a first-class gardener. Oh, I know he is, said Lady Coote. She looked enviously at Bundle, who appeared to approach the task of keeping MacDonald in his place so light-heartedly. I just adore a high-toned garden, said the Countess dreamily. Bundle stared, but at that moment a diversion occurred. Jimmy Thesiger entered the room and spoke directly to her in a strange, hurried voice. I say, will you come and see those etchings now? They're waiting for you. Bundle left the room hurriedly, Jimmy close behind her. What etchings? She asked as the drawing-room door closed behind her. No etchings, said Jimmy. I got to say something to get hold of you. Come on. Bill is waiting for us in the library. There's nobody there. Bill was striding up and down the library, clearly in a very perturbed state of mind. Look here, he burst out. I don't like this. Don't like what? You being mixed up in this. 10-1, there's going to be a rough house, and then... He looked at her with a kind of pathetic dismay that gave Bundle a warm and comfortable feeling. She ought to be kept out of it. Oughtn't she, Jimmy? He appealed to the other. I've told her so, said Jimmy. Dash it all. Bundle. I mean, someone might get hurt. Bundle turned round to Jimmy. How much have you told him? Oh, everything. I haven't got the hang of it all yet, confessed Bill. You in that place in 7 Dials and all that. He looked at her unhappily. I say, Bundle, I wish you wouldn't. Wouldn't what? Get mixed up in these sort of things. Why not? Said Bundle. They're exciting. Oh yes, exciting. But they may be damnably dangerous. Look at poor old Ronnie. Yes, said Bundle. If it hadn't been for your friend Ronnie, I don't suppose I should ever have got what you call mixed up in this thing. But I am, and it's no earthly use your bleating about it. I know you're the most frightful sport, Bundle, but cut out the compliments. Let's make plans. To her relief, Bill reacted favorably to the suggestion. You're right about the formula, he said. Eberhard's got some sort of formula with him, or rather Sir Oswald has. The stuff has been tested out at his works, very secretly and all that. Eberhard has been down there with him. They're all in the study now, what you might call coming down to brass tacks. How long is Sir Stanley Digby staying? Asked Jimmy. Going back to town tomorrow. Said Jimmy. Then one thing's quite clear. If, as I suppose, Sir Stanley will be taking the formula with him, any funny business there's going to be will be tonight. I suppose it will. Not a doubt of it. That narrows the thing down very comfortably. But the bright lads will have to be their very brightest. We must come down to details. First of all, where will the sacred formula be tonight? Will Eberhard have it, or Sir Oswald Coote? Neither. I understand it's to be handed over to the Air Minister this evening, for him to take to town tomorrow. In that case, O'Rourke will have it. Sure, too. Well, there's only one thing for it. If we believe someone's gonna have a shot at pinching that paper, we gotta keep watch tonight, Bill, my boy. Bundle opened her mouth as though to protest, but shut it again without speaking. By the way, continued Jimmy, did I recognize the commissionaire from Harrods in the hall this evening? Or was it our old friend Lestrade from Scotland Yard? Scintillating Watson, said Bill. I suppose, said Jimmy, that we are rather butting in on his preserves. Can't be helped, said Bill. Not if we mean to see this thing through. Then it's agreed, said Jimmy. We divide the night into 2 watches. Again Bundle opened her mouth, and again shut it without speaking. Right you are, agreed Bill. Who'll take first duty? Shall we spin for it? Might as well. All right, here goes. Heads you first, and I second. Tails, vice versa. Bill nodded. The coin spun in the air. Jimmy bent to look at it. Tails, he said. Damn, said Bill. You get first half, and probably any fun that's going. Oh, you never know, said Jimmy. Criminals are very uncertain. What time shall I wake you? 3:30. That's about fair, I think. And now, at last, Bundle spoke. What about me? She asked. Nothing doing. You go to bed and sleep. Oh, said Bundle. That's not very exciting. You never know, said Jimmy kindly. You may be murdered in your sleep, whilst Bill and I escape scot-free. Well, there's always that possibility. Do you know, Jimmy, I don't half like the look of that countess. I suspect her. Nonsense, cried Bill hotly. She's absolutely above suspicion. How do you know? Retorted Bundle. Because I do. Why? One of the fellows at the Hungarian embassy vouched for her. Oh, said Bundle, momentarily taken aback by his fervor. You girls are all the same, grumbled Bill. Just because she's a jolly, good-looking woman. Bundle was only too well acquainted with this unfair masculine line of argument. Well, don't you go and pour confidences into her shell-pink ear, she remarked. I'm going to bed. I was bored stiff in the drawing room, and I'm not going back. She left the room. Bill looked at Jimmy. Good old bundle, he said. I was afraid we might have trouble with her. You know how keen she is to be in everything. I think the way she took it was just wonderful. So did I, said Jimmy. It staggered me. She's got some sense, Bundle has. She knows when a thing's plumb impossible. I say, oughtn't we to have some lethal weapons? Chaps usually do when they're going on this sort of stunt. I have a blue-nosed automatic, said Jimmy with gentle pride. It weighs several pounds and looks most murderous. I'll lend it to you when the time comes. Bill looked at him with respect and envy. What made you think of getting that? He said. I don't know, said Jimmy carelessly. It just came to me. I hope we shan't go and shoot the wrong person, said Bill with some anxiety. That would be unfortunate, said Mr. Thesiger gravely. And with that, the mystery deepens even further. The clues are falling into place, but danger is closing in. The 7 dials hold more secrets than ever. How much longer before the truth is fully revealed? Stay tuned for the next part, where the final pieces of the puzzle come together. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Share your thoughts. Who do you think is behind it all? The answers are near. See you in the next part.